Good day, all, and welcome to the QEM Heroes webinar series. I'm Christine Wood, and I serve as the Assistant Program Director for the Heroes Fellows Program at QEM. And for more than 30 years, QEM has been a national catalyst for STEM education transformation and research capacity building. Currently, the QEM network serves nearly 900 colleges and universities and reaches more than 8,000 individuals nationwide. This webinar is part of the HEROES initiative. The HEROES program brings together former federal scientists to lend their expertise and support to the STEM research and education communities. Our fellows are here to provide tools and tips for navigating the funding landscape, developing STEM programs and partnerships, and improving talent retention in in-demand fields. We hope this series promotes engagement with our HEROES fellows and provides valuable resources to our participants. The webinar recordings and slides will be available in the QEM Resource Hub. By attending this webinar, you will soon be added to the QEM network and granted access to the Resource Hub. And I'm very proud to introduce our presenter today. Dr. Joseph Isaac has spent the past 20 years as a STEM educator, ambassador, and connector among underrepresented populations and communities, both domestically and globally. His experience includes previous roles at the National Science Foundation, the Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellowship, Education Development Center, District of Columbia Public Schools, and Howard University. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to Dr. Isaac.
Thank you, Dr. Wood, and good afternoon to all. Well, good afternoon on the East Coast, good morning on Central and Pacific and Mountain Time. Once again, my name is Dr. Joseph Isaac, and I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about developing a globally collaborative STEM mindset. So with that said, let me share my screen. Okay, good. Okay, so yes, I already did the title, so I'll skip to the next. So I wanted to start off, and I didn't have a poll this time, so I'm hoping that people will maybe chime in the chat for a few minutes. So I wanted to start off with asking, or let me rephrase. I want you to think about this. All right. Your smartphone has probably traveled more than most people. Okay. And so I want you to think about it a little bit and say, like, where was your phone designed? Where was it engineered? Where was it manufactured, programmed, assembled, supplied with raw materials, or any other thing? That thing you have in your hand that we all now depend on and has more computing power than the Apollo rocket that took men to the moon in the late 60s and early 70s. Where was it all designed? Where was it engineered? Where was it manufactured? So just give me just a couple of answers. Let's see if anybody has any ideas. No more than 30 seconds.
And the chat is open for everyone to participate.
And this is what I tell my students. If you don't have any idea, then that is fine as well, because this is what we're all here about, right? So I asked that question because, usually one device represents dozens of countries working together, okay? And so we have come to this realization that even in this age of increased nationalism all over the globe, you're seeing these negative portrayals about countries looking inward and being more insular and displaying these ultra, hostile nationalist views, even in all of that. All right. The globe is we're connected. Let's put it that way. All right. So global STEM already exists. It's been that way for a while. And the issue is that education simply has not caught up. Okay. And so why does this matter? Right. Uh, Thank you, B. Kelly, for that. I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea. That's a good one. So why this matters, right? Because um, once again, we are more of a global society than ever before. And so, being that we're a global society, can anyone solve certain problems by themselves? Climate change, or artificial intelligence, pandemics. Even the word pandemic, that's worldwide, right? Food security and insecurity, water insecurity, the energy crisis, cybersecurity, space exploration, all of these large endeavors are done with collaborative effort through partners all around the globe. And so our learning objectives for today, we're going to understand global STEM education, collaboration. We're going to explore the characteristics of globally collaborative educators, which is very interesting. We're going to explore the GLOBE framework. There's this learning framework that I think is helpful. Um, and we're going to learn classroom applications and best practices. Okay. All right. And so when we talk about STEM education, we have to look at STEM itself, right? And STEM has fundamentally changed. So we have industrial age STEM, we have information age STEM, and we have global information age STEM, right? And so let's look at industrial age STEM, because as antiquated as these things may look to us now, in the Industrial Revolution, like this was the height of technology, right? The use of new energy sources, the use of basic materials, invention of new machines that led to increased production, um, developments in transportation and communication. We had the telegraph, and then the telephone after that. And so these applications of science and industry then led to, I mean, these applications of science and engineering then led to and then led to advances in industry. All right. So therefore, this is when we're talking about the Industrial Revolution, so to speak, or the first and second industrial revolutions. And then we get to the information age, right? And I use this picture here. This was one of the early NASA computers, um, working on some big old vacuum tube machine. But once again, at that time in the late 60s and throughout the 60s and 70s, this was the zenith of technology, right? And so that information age, or that information age STEM, beginning in the mid 20th century, is usually defined by sort of rapid advancement from industry to information technology. So we have less, the number of people working in factories during that industrial age has declined. And then the information age coming, so greater automation, taking us from transistors to personal computers, things of that nature. And so then that brings us to now, the global information age, which is basically, you could say, from the 21st century up to present. And that's obviously characterized by AI and augmented and virtual reality, and basically deeper human machine interactions, right? And so um, that new generation of students that are coming along require different skills from the generations that came before it. That's natural, right? And so we're moving from individual expertise to collective intelligence, right? And so I'm a anybody who knows me, I'm a bit of a jokester, and I'm a bit of a pop culture nerd. So when I have this old mindset, I solve problems quote, I put it in Google. And I was like, what's a good visual for that? And it came upon this scene from Pulp Fiction where Harvey Keitel is like, I'm Winston Wolfe and I solve problems. And if you know the movie, then you know the scene that I'm talking about. And so we're going from the old mindset of I solve problems to the new mindset of we solve global problems. And that's where that that transition from individual expertise to collective intelligence has to take place. And so, since that takes place in society, it needs to take place in education. So then what is global STEM education collaboration? So I'll read this quote. The intentional partnership of educators, learners, researchers, and institutions across national and cultural boundaries to improve STEM teaching, learning, innovation, and problem solving through shared knowledge, diverse perspectives, and collaborative practice. All right. Sounds like a mouthful, but it makes complete sense. And so, why does global collaboration matter, right? And so this goes back to a couple of slides before when we were looking at the Industrial Revolution and preparing the workforce. So today's students become tomorrow's workforce, okay? And tomorrow's workforce are more than likely going to need to work in international research development teams for whatever problem to solve. And so those international research development teams will then be called on to address and hopefully solve global challenges. So this is why global collaboration, start them off early. It's no different from um, when we talk about language immersion in young elementary age students. It's the same premise, right? You get kids started out um, understanding that they are not alone in the world and understanding that there are people and children and kids just like them in far reaches of the world, and we all need to work together to solve issues. All right, so what I always like to talk about is how did my global STEM journey come about? Because everybody's journey is different. And I guess you could say my journey started relatively early, simply, and I'll tell you why, that I am the son of a Caribbean immigrant. My father is from the island of Antigua, my mother being from here, North Carolina, but with that, growing up, it was nothing for them to put me on a plane to go down to the islands and see relatives by myself. So I started out I started out knowing that the world was large. Um, going to visit relatives in England and knowing that I had cousins in Australia and Canada. And so I had this sort of global mindset from the beginning before I, even knew how that was going to fit into my life. It was a fact of life. So then takes me to Howard University, and then later on being a teacher in DCPS where I actually, because global collaboration was nothing new to me. I didn't think anything of starting these collaborative projects with other teachers in other countries. It was just something I did. So then that took me to the Einstein Fellowship, where then I was able to actually hone those skills and present on collaborative issues. I remember we had a conference in Bangkok, Thailand, where I talked just about that. And then that took me to my doctoral program, which found me, and it was a perfect match because the whole premise of the Global Prize program was globally collaborative STEM education, which I had already been doing. Um, then that led me to Planet Three, which was an ed tech startup in which we were looking to solve these global issues through STEM focused gaming education. Then that led me to Education Development Center, in which I ran these global projects. The Amgen Biotech Experience, I was the executive director of that for a couple of years, and then I ran an Inspiring Climate Action Now program, which we train teachers on elementary climate science and how to utilize climate science to further science education in different countries. So we train teachers in Zambia, we train teachers in Antigua and Barbuda. And so that leads me to here. So I say all that to say, um, I was a global educator before I knew what a global educator was supposed to be. All right. So with that being said, that brings us to what are some characteristics of a globally minded STEM educator, right? And what you're going to see is a lot of these characteristics are just anchored in common sense. And when you think about it, they make sense, right? And so first of all, you need to anchor lessons and pedagogy in real global issues. Okay. Issues that affect more than just you or more than just one student. It is truly an international topic that we need to tackle here. So using authentic inquiry in real life global examples, materials, and resources when considering these human issues. Okay. Understanding cultural identity and modeling cultural sensitivity for yourself and for your students. And so keep in mind, so this whole talk is looking at things from student and teacher perspectives, right? And so when we're talking about that, we're talking about fostering this cultural identity and knowing its influence on personal dispositions and classroom practice. And that's keeping an open and adventurous mind. And that's once again for teacher and student alike. Um, and then that comes with a warning, right? And this is a good warning. Developing a globally empathetic ethos usually runs counter to damaging ideologies. Okay. And I didn't get that. I didn't get that term from somewhere. I made that up completely, but it makes sense, right? When you start looking at yourself as a citizen of the world, you tend to then look at these ultra nationalist views as somewhat archaic and Neanderthalic, to be quite honest. All right. Um, Teach students to make the connection between local actions and technological advances to impact the wider world, right? And so, um, environmental concerns, economic shifts. Um, these are all um, these are all things that may affect students locally, but it's important to bring that global perspective in. Oh, okay, so you guys are having issues here because you were hit with a hurricane and your school is damaged. And so we just want you to know that you're not the only one. Let's see what happened over here in this country and what these students are going through. That gives a more collective mindset in terms of helping each other. All right. And this is a big one. This is one that I'm super passionate about is not just breaking down educational silos, but blowing them up relatively. Um, I do believe gone should be the days of, oh, this hour I'm teaching math, this hour I'm teaching social studies, this hour I'm teaching, English, and really interdisciplinary problem solving should be the watchword of the day because that's how the world works, right? Um, when I leave this presentation, I'm not going to go in the kitchen and just have a math mindset on terms of how much food I'm going to eat. I have to have an interdisciplinary mindset on how to cook the food and then you know how to prepare the food. So breaking down educational silos is crucial. All right. Develop a design thinking mindset. And this is interesting because I was just teaching this to my School of Education students yesterday, talking about the design thinking process. And those steps are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. Now, what makes that really interesting is the use of empathetic, human-centered thoughts and actions. Okay, and those are crucial when confronted with complex global issues. Okay, and then lastly, seize every opportunity to pay it forward. There's no sense in being that teacher or that professor that has this really interesting opportunity um, for global collaboration and keeping it to yourselves. That pay it forward. If you know there are other teachers that are interested in doing the same thing, collaborate with them or mentor them. All right. So preparing future STEM educators or that influences teacher preparation. All right. So now we get to the actual globe framework, okay? And why do we need a new framework? I'm a big framework person. Um, So how do we intentionally prepare globally collaborative STEM educators and therefore globally collaborative STEM learners? Okay. Because once again, being a teacher, like it starts and ends with you and how you prepare will then filter down on how your students are prepared. Okay. And so looking at this framework, we're looking at global awareness feeding into learning partnerships and open communication, and then building cultural competence and equity through collaboration. And that's how you get your globe, which then is global STEM education collaboration. All right. And then from there, you have a continuous growth mindset and continuous growth ecosystem if looking at this framework holistically. All right, so let's look at the parts of it. All right, G for global awareness, obviously. All right, what global issues affect my students? Um, how are these scientific challenges interconnected? And then you can, let's you can look at issues like the impact of climate change on education. I mentioned that before, you know. um, And so when we talk about climate change impact, we're looking even more deeply and drilling down more succinctly than just overall, oh, it's getting hotter, the storms are getting stronger. Like what happens when a school is flooded? What happens when a flood comes in and or there's a wildfire and the actual physical school is destroyed? But what happens? What happens, God forbid, if there's a global pandemic and people got to stay home, right? Um, issues like armed conflict. Um, Before I left EDC, one of the last projects that we were starting to do was to develop educational tools for children in Gaza. Like they're, living in a literal armed conflict zone, but they still needed to learn. And how would that happen? What did that look like? Um, and then obviously we're talking about excuse me, equitable access to technology, and we'll mention that a little further. And before I move on, I wanted to point out this pyramid here. And for any sort of education student, we all have recognized Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so what I found is that I kept going back to this hierarchy. This is the hierarchy of human needs, but I kept going back to it when during my teaching practice and looking at, hey, like let's be really sensitive to these needs. If the physiological needs and safety and security needs aren't met, like food, water, if a child is coming to school hungry, or there's no shelter, or they're not sleeping, or there's no security and safety, then you truly can't expect them to learn long division. That's just not how it works. So I use this always, and I literally in my classroom at Howard I have this pyramid up on the board. And so I'm constantly asking my students, I'm like, look back at the hierarchy. Are those needs being met to get students to self-actualization, to get them to self-esteem? Okay. And the L stands for learning partnerships. All right. And I can, go on, ad nauseum with all of these acronyms, but I'm gonna try and move them ahead. So we're looking at like virtual exchanges, international classrooms, obviously collaborative investigations, which we'll go into more detail further on, research partnerships, engineering design challenges. Now, this L is really teacher centric in terms of sort of building a rapport and trust across identity differences, being able to culturally synchronize, creating alliances and shared goals and commitments with different educators, and then listening to and learning from your students. All right, we're never too old and too high to learn from the kids because the kids are honest. They'll let you know. All right. The next is open communication. Okay. So when we talk about open communication, we're talking about it on a couple of different levels. We're looking at actual the actual literal communication of can I talk to you? Can you hear me? Is my internet connection okay? But then we're talking about intercultural communication, right? Like just not only the um, not only the physical aspect of it, but am I sensitive to your culture, to your cultural practices as well as you being sensitive to mine or respectful, shall we say? All right. And then B, building cultural competence, right? So that usually comes with you know, uh, community cultural wealth and belonging and inclusion. All of these watchwords that are not very popular with certain governments today, but I continue to use them. I continue to live by them. All right. Always tying your work back to opportunity gaps and achievement gaps. Okay. And so then having an appreciation of culture, right? Students see their own cultures as strengths, seek to understand the cultures of others, and be aware of similarities and differences. All right. And then E, equity through collaboration. Okay. Once again, that one of those non popular words these days is equity, but having the opportunity to make sure that everyone has access, make sure that everyone is represented, make sure that mentorship goes across the board, not just for those that have, but those that have not. Um, and obviously sharing resources. Okay. So when we're talking about, this sort of being the heart of the philosophy, working with and building relationships with people who have different backgrounds, it adds meaning. All right. Um, and global collaboration should expand opportunities, sort of not simply connect those who already have it. And that's an important. I'm going to read that again. Global opportunity should expand global collaboration should expand opportunity, not simply connect those who already have it. That's a bar. All right. So what environments would this framework operate? Well, basically any environment you can think of, right? Um, K through 12, universities, museums, industry. So we're talking about formal, informal, and non-formal education spaces. If you remember, if any of those who were on my last talk, um, industry, community, international partners, research centers, virtual exchange, and then non-governmental organizations. So this isn't really a checklist. This is sort of a continuous professional growth mindset here. So environments where this framework operates is just about everywhere you can think of. All right, so putting Globe into practice, like what are some of your classroom applications? And I do believe that since this presentation is going to be shared, I have linked all of these examples to their actual corresponding websites, right? Because this is, I don't want to just talk. I want to be able to provide some tools for your education toolbox, shall we say. All right, so then what do we do to prepare future teachers? Okay. So what should teacher preparation programs include, right? And so when we talk about preparing future teachers, we're talking about schools of education. And so on at the very limited, at the very top level, it should be students should come out of there knowing having global competencies. We'll investigate those global competencies in a second, but I wanted to go through the rest. And I'm sorry if you guys hear this siren going on, but it's quite loud. Um, Virtual collaboration, international partnerships, cross-cultural pedagogy. You're seeing a lot of the same terms pop up, over and over again. Um, so let's go back to here, the domains of global confidence, right? And so one is investigate the world beyond the immediate environment, right? Framing significant problems and conducting well-crafted and age-appropriate research. The other is recognize perspectives, others and their own. So that means articulating and explaining such perspectives thoughtfully and respectfully, right? Then we look at communicating ideas effectively with diverse audiences, and that involves bridging geographic, linguistic, and ideological cultural barriers. And then last, we have take action. So once we investigate, recognize, and communicate, then it's time to actually take action. And so this is where we move from the theoretical to the practical, right? So take action to improve those conditions in which you've identified. Okay. Um, Utilize project-based learning. That's a project-based and problem-based learning. Those are major cross-cultural pedagogical instruments that you can take advantage of, and you should. All right. So now everything good comes with some challenges, right? That just makes sense. So when we're looking at how to accurately implement, a global collaboration, that's going to come with a few asterisks and caveats, right? One being technology, and I like to put more so the access to and proper use of technology. Um, what uh, you know, does everybody have the bandwidth to do this? Um, does everybody have technology to communicate? And the cool thing well, I'll mention that later. So then we're looking at time. All right. Now, if you ask any teacher, any professor, like time is the great enemy because like you want me to work with, I don't have any time as it is, and you want me to work with some teachers and students on the other side of the world. That's what you'll get from a lot of people. um Funding, okay. Now, I say funding with an asterisk because now, with the advent of like worldwide web 2.0 resources, funding a global collaboration project doesn't have to necessarily be prohibitive, right? There are I always tell people, don't reinvent the wheel. There are resources out there, and there are projects that you can utilize that only require basically your web 2.0 tools and your students' minds and their imaginations. Okay. Language, communication, man. So there's a small story I have to tell with that. This was during my PhD program. We had a collaborative project with a sister school in Beijing, and that collaborative project involved us together, developing a product to solve an international issue. And so I distinctly remember um, having a Zoom meeting with the students from Beijing, and my command of Mandarin was nil, and their command of English was little. And so we were having a really hard time. And so, but luckily I had a trump card in my house. It was my children all spoke Mandarin. They attended a Chinese immersion school for elementary. And so my oldest son, who was obviously the most fluent at the time, he walked across the doorway and I grabbed him. I was like, "Come in here." And so I literally had this, I guess he was 11 at the time, this 11-year-old kid translating and talking to my counterparts in Beijing, and so you can imagine the confusion on their faces. I found it quite hilarious when they were looking. Then when they found out they were communicating in their mother tongue in Mandarin with this 11-year-old black kid from the States. It took them a while for them to sort of come to terms with that. But I say all that to say that technology, I mean that language is one of the biggest barriers of doing these collaborative projects, right? And so, which is why most people, when they do collaborative projects, they tend to do things in, in with other locales that speak the same language. All right. Then obviously partnership development and institutional support. I'm gonna speak real quickly about institutional support. Um, Institutional support is crucial if there's money involved. Okay. If you're looking, if I'll give you an example. If you're doing a K through 12 project, that's usually that's sort of web based. it, you don't have to go to your admin and ask for money, usually. Now, if you're doing a project that's going to involve, travel, students coming to see you, your students going to see them, then we're talking about significant funds. And so that's where institutional support would come in, whether it be your district, whether it be your school, if it's a deep-pocketed private school, or the university level, obviously. All right. So looking forward, what so like let's just imagine, let's put our kumbaya hat on for a second and just say, what would that look like? What would that vision look like if every STEM classroom was connected globally? If all the students were solving authentic international problems, if the teachers were collaborating across continents, and you have this true learning without borders. Now, this may seem like futuristic, but I promise you, there are more teachers doing this sort of thing than you actually know. And that goes back to, like I said, not reinventing the wheel. Like, just like look at the resources out there that are available to you and pick one. There are literally hundreds of projects and topics for you to choose that you could start looking into this global collaborative mindset. And so I just gave you a few resources, just a few. Um, Smithsonian, Science for Global Goals, Top 10 Characteristics of Globally Competent Teachers, the Asia Society, Partnership for Global Learning, Designing Student Projects for Global Readiness, the Department of Education Framework for Developing Global and Cultural Competencies. Now, that one I'm about to go into the next slide. We're about to look into that a little bit more in depth. Simply because I'm a bit of a rebel rouser. I can be, and I will say that this was developed in 2017, and I can't find it on the Department of Education website now. Framework for developing global and cultural competencies to advance equity, excellence, and economic competitiveness. And I'm going to assume that because of the word equity, it was taken out. All right. But luckily it exists everywhere else. So this is a really cool flow chart here, and it tells you what these things will look like if you're in early learning, if you're on the elementary level, if you're in secondary level, if you're in post-secondary level, and what globally and cultural competence looks like in terms of your students. And so it can, it'll take you through, hey, what type of collaboration and communication should you be looking forward to if you're an elementary school teacher, or if you're on the university level. Same thing with world heritage and languages and diverse perspectives. and then civil and global engagement. So I like this, and I wanted to put it up there because I didn't want to just talk about it, because I wanted to actually put it up there, because it's not, you can't find it anymore because of our, yeah, let me not go there. All right, so from the Department of Education, or what used to be. All right, so then just some reflections. What kind of STEM educator does the world need now? Okay. And so when we're reflecting on this, what we're trying to do is we're trying to prepare students for the future. And what that means is preparing them to learn with and lead with and innovate with people whose experiences and perspectives differ from their own. I can't stress that enough. All right. Global collaboration is not an enrichment, it is an educational imperative. Now, um, I'll go back to what the director of my doctoral program at Texas Tech said. And he's a guy from Texas, and he was like, the reason why we're doing this global collaboration program is I'm a firm believer that the more we get to know people in other places, the less likely we're going to want to kill each other. And he was very frank about that, and it was a very down to earth statement. But when you think about it, it is true. Like, getting to know each other on a human level obviously humanizes us, and so that's the take home message here. All right. And so then we have references, and we have, I think I finished a little bit early. And so I'm thanking you. So I'd like to open the floor for any questions.
And thank you, Dr. Isaac, so much. We have a few options for questions. You can put your question in the chat. You can use the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand to come off mute and ask Dr. Isaac a question directly. Are allowed to speak. And Dr. Erickson, I've taken you off mute.
Thank you, Dr. Wood. Appreciate it. Dr. Isaac, question
Yes,
for
ma'am.
you. I noticed
Yes.
a bit of your examples for collaboration included more like issues, things that were occurring in the community that may be detrimental. Could you provide any suggestions, say, for collaboration that might be innovative for the future? And how would you approach that?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. So yeah, and if that came across, um, if that take home message came across as to solve problems, and then I that is a part of it. But yes, um, there exists several resources looking at collaborative projects that are forward looking, especially when we're talking about coding and computer science and robotics. These are I'll point to your engineering grand challenges, right? Um, if I can go back, let me go back real quick. Let me go. Uh, okay. I think it's this one, designing student projects for global readiness. Um, that one, and there's a couple of NASA sites that talk about engineering grand challenges, that don't just necessarily deal with solving problems and solving issues. They do deal with more of building, community building, global community building. And so I will make sure that before this presentation is put out there, I'll add those resources to this, because they do exist. And thank you for pointing that out.
So it wasn't a ding. I was just hoping that you had some examples, so thank
Oh
you.
yeah. No, no, I didn't
And
take it as a ding. I'm glad you pointed that out because that's the last thing I wanted to, so I sometimes I'm guilty of being the sky is falling type guy. And so so I'm glad you pointed that out because there are resources that I do have and that I'll throw in there that are, for lack of a better term, uplifting.
okay, can I have a follow-up question?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So when you collaborate with the international groups or the global partners, who ends up owning sort of the intellectual rights to say a great idea? How do you negotiate that
Man.
piece?
That's a great question. I will go, I will use an example that I was involved in. And that goes back to when I was with EDC and I was running the Inspiring Climate Action Now program. Um, that the intellectual property that was developed out of that program belongs to those teachers that help develop it, because this is their community. So the practical example was when I went to Lusaka, Zambia, and I trained teachers for 3 weeks on developing um, climate climate science lessons and projects for their children. That I didn't take that with me. That intellectual property belongs to them. It belongs to their school. It belongs to the Ministry of Education of Zambia, and the same thing with when I did the same thing in Antigua and Barbuda. And so, but you bring up a really good point because, um, and this goes back to other collaboration talks we've had in webinars, is that you don't want, like, this is a truly collaborative effort, and because it's a collaborative effort, like, you know what you want to try to avoid is the fighting back and forth, or the arguing back and forth. Oh, well, this property then belongs to me because we developed it, and even though I developed it with you, I'm taking control over it. And so those are things that have to be ironed out well in advance. And I would say when you're starting to foster a collaborative project, make sure, you know what, fostering a collaborative project is much like starting a new relationship, right? So you want to open those lines of communication and say, if you snore at night, then you want to say you snore at night so they're not surprised, that type thing. And having ownership of whatever comes out of that collaboration, that is that is something that needs to be discussed early on, so that people know. Now, with me, personally, I don't own anything. If I'm collaborating with somebody, especially if I'm collaborating with them in their country, that belongs to them. I'm just sort of the guide on the side that helped them get to where they're going. But I do realize that a lot of people don't do that, and that's a shame.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
We have a question from Dr. Chaz Gibson. I will allow Dr. Gibson to come off mute.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Dr. Joseph, for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Uh, my question is slightly, while in topic, but off topic. But what are your thoughts on? I'm sorry, I just had a quick brain freeze. What
Sorry.
What are your thoughts on um, in terms of abroad? Doing teaching, not teaching abroad, but what is it called? Fulbright, sorry.
Oh, yeah. And what's so interesting is that I have several colleagues that are now abroad. I have a good friend. We were Einstein fellows together, She is teaching in India. She's been there for the past 2 years. One of my best friends is about to leave for Saudi Arabia in the next month and teach acting for a year. And so I think I think that type of sort of educational exchange, via whether it be Fulbright, as a matter of fact, and I was fortunate enough that when I was teaching in DCPS at McKinley Tech, we did a Fulbright exchange. We fostered a Fulbright exchange with a school district in London, Islington, North London, or North Central London, and we did this exchange in which and it was through Fulbright, and we did this exchange to where we actually took a group of teachers, myself included, and we spent 2 weeks in London, working and collaborating with students and teachers there. And so any chance you get, so I'll put it this way, and this is almost like a kind of a selfish way to think of it. I'm a traveler. I love traveling, and so any chance I get to combine my two of my loves of traveling and education, I'm gonna take it. And so I say that to say that it is the especially Fulbright. That is a more than worthwhile opportunity to look into or to point other educators towards.
Wow, that's amazing. I know uh Tarina and I'm not sure if she's on the call or not. I know we had discussions about it when we were at INSPA, and we attended a session uh, on understanding the Fulbright process and things like that. And we, I know I for sure, I know they have like two deadlines this year. I think one was in July, which is now, but the next one is like September to apply, and it's certainly been on my
Yeah,
mind.
I love
And
Fulbright. Yeah.
and then the other piece was I know you could do a short term theme or a long term. I think they said a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks and a maximum of like up to 6 weeks or a few months or something. So how do you gauge what's for you, if that makes sense?
How do you gauge what's for you?
In terms of time from like if you want to do short term, long term, or even picking the place that you want to serve in.
So how we did it, I'll give you the example of how we did it is we actually wrote we developed our proposal because we wanted to go, you know, we wanted to go to the UK because first of all at McKinley we had a partnership, we had a collaborative partnership in our broadcast technology department with a university in the UK. So we thought that if we could craft our proposal for that, it would, because we already had this existing tie, would be more likely to be accepted, which it was. Also, in terms of looking at time frame, because we had to work during the auspices of the school year, like we had to choose our spring break time, which wasn't spring break for Islington, but and then so instead of having to, for the school administrators, instead of having to find subs for 8 teachers for 2 weeks. They only had to find subs for 8 teachers for 1 week because one of our weeks of travel was during spring break. So you have to just think of those types of logistical planning, in terms of how long you how long you want to go and where you're thinking about going to. Like I said, I when I was running the climate program at EDC, I was choosing any place that had to do with the diaspora. That was just me. Like that was my focus. And so I purposely sought out those partnerships with those countries.
That's good. That's good. And I think my no, that's good. Thank you and
Yeah,
helpful.
absolutely.
Oh, my last question, that's
Yeah.
what I was going to ask you. In terms of your assignment, do you get to choose? So like I don't know in terms of teaching how that looks. Are you going over just serving as a guest lecturer? Are you training? Are you doing research? Because I'm sure you can't teach a whole class in 2 weeks, particularly to students, but I don't know how it works. How is that in terms of selecting the assignment and getting there and actually doing it?
And so because that experience for me was about 12 years ago, I don't know how it's changed. Oh no, it was more than 12 years ago. Oh my gosh. It was, wow, I'm aging myself. It was 20 years ago. So I don't know if they've changed much since then, but I can tell you how we did it. We went in, we did we did collaborative meetings with the teachers, and we did guest lectures with the students, and just did these activities with students. And I remember distinctly, I was like, wow, kids are the same everywhere. I was like, kids are the same everywhere, man. They may have different languages and different, but they are the same everywhere. It was
No,
a
that's
great
funny you
experience.
said that. And you're right, because I remember teaching a interpersonal communications class before, and one of the sections they gave me, actually this happened twice. I had received the class with all of the international students, and I was so nervous. Some were much older than me, and all kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And but after realize, I just walked in and treated it like I would treat any other class. And
Yeah.
they had the same challenges, the same issues, the same
Yep.
concerns, and it just
Same,
turned out
same, man.
being great.
And when we talk about like having that collaborative mindset, that's so important to realize. I'm like, man, kids are kids. Adults are adults, kids are kids, so we may have these cultural differences, but at the crux of the matter is so much more similarity than differences.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think key was just to make sure that they felt seen, that they felt like they belonged, and then that we were able to incorporate parts of their culture and different
Yep.
cultures in the
Yeah.
class. I had
That's
students from
important.
Africa, Mexico, China. They were all in this one class, Nepal, and so it was quite interesting.
That's important. Yeah.
Hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. No, you're welcome. Thank you.
And our resident global health expert, Dr. Amaka Wankwo, has commented that I have been a Fulbright reviewer for almost 20 years. Good to note that Fulbright has three levels: student, scholar, professional, and what we call the FLIP program, where foreign applicants study in the US. It's good to know.
That's cool. I like this. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit more about that, Maka. I like that.
Dr. Isaac, can you go to the closing slide?
Yes, I surely can. Here we go.
I want to thank everyone for coming to our webinar today. Dr. Isaac's talks always inspire such great conversation. We hope that you will choose to come to future webinars. You can go to the QEM events page and see what's coming up on the docket. And you can go to the Heroes webpage to connect with our fellows. And you can use this QR code to fill out the workshop feedback form, and we can learn more about what you'd like us to pursue in the future. And in the interest of time, yes, thank you for the great seminar. Yes, this was a wonderful presentation from Dr. Isaac.
Thank
Um,
you.
we want to encourage you to continue coming to our webinars, and I wish you a great afternoon today.
Everyone have a great afternoon. And if you are a soccer fan, make sure to tune into the game.
That's another take on global collaboration.
Absolutely. World Cup, baby. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.